We're going to talk line angles now and whether you should fish a tight or slack line. I notice here, mate, you're fishing a fair distance out. Got your rod tips cranked up, which looks pretty cool, I have to say. Very, very light bobbins. You've got the stoves with no weight on them whatsoever, and the lines are drooping down fairly slack off the tip. So explain why you're fishing as slack as that at that sort of distance.
Well, I just want the end tackle to be sort of, and the immediate area behind the end tackle to be down on the lake bed. I don't want it to be entering my baited area off the bottom.
Right.
So,
and you think that can happen just with a normal bobbin setup and what looks like a tight line?
Oh, definitely.
Even with the rod tips down?
Even with the rod tips down, definitely. You know, any sort of, if it hasn't got a droop in it, it's not slack, you know. It's got if it's got tension running through it, it's going to be off the bottom.
Yeah, because you see people with the bobbin hanging down that far under the rod, still a heavy bobbin,
yeah.
line tight, and they think they're fishing a slack line because the bobbin's not right underneath the rod.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's not the case, is it?
That's not the case, no, not at all.
Right, so how much of that line, well, how far out are you fishing? What's the depth of water, and how much line do you think's on the bottom?
I'm 120 yards out, and
Right.
I'd say the back 50 yards is probably on the bottom.
The 50 yards from the rig back towards you?
Yeah.
Right, okay. And your line, I mean, how much line have you paid off the reels to get to that point?
Probably 2 to 3 metres, I'd imagine.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And how long has that taken you to do that?
Just sort of over the course of time, as the bobbins start rising up, I just start to pay out a little bit more, like, you know, just a little bit more. And once they stop rising up, you're pretty much down.
Right, okay, cool. And when would you fish a situation, you know, when would you actually fish with a tight line?
If I thought it was crucial, you know, for say, fishing to snags, I wouldn't fish a ridiculously tight line, but a tighter line, so that the slack, by the time I pick the rod up, I don't want them to have that slack to already got in there, you know. I want I'd fish it sort of, I'd pull it tight to the spot, probably pay off a foot, so I've got a little bit of a droop, and that's it. Right,
okay, so the bobbin's just hanging down a short distance underneath the rod.
Yeah.
Right, okay. And a lot of people think the stows are only for fishing with super slack lines. What's your take on that?
Well, they can do everything that any bobbin can do.
Yeah.
The slack line issue is there for the clip. You know, that clip makes them great for slack lines because they're not always pulling tension from the rod end. They can pull to the reel end.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that a conventional bobbin does that they don't.
Right. Okay. And talk to us about the line, you know, and the rod setup and everything else that you've got on.
The line's a 15-pound subline. I always tend to use a line of 0.4 diameter because I always see the thicker it is, each nick out of it is a smaller percentage that would be out of a thinner line.
Right, okay. So there's less, the thicker the line, the more punishment it can take.
Yeah, the more punishment it can take.
Effectively. And that's the brown subline, isn't it? Do you have a preference between the brown and green?
I'm generally using the brown on sort of murkier places because it just obviously blends in better, and the green when it's sort of tap water clear.
Right, okay. And do you go lighter in line?
Only if it's about range, you know. Sort of 120 yards is flat out pretty much for a 15-pound subline for me.
Right.
Probably could push it more, but then you're into the realms of cracking off. So like anything, if I'm fishing under 110, 99% of the time on the water, then that's what I'll be using.
Right.
But if I'm, say when I'm fishing a little bit further out, then I will drop to a diameter line of between 0.3 and 0.35.
Right, so 0.3 is about 10 pound, 0.35 is 12 to 15 pound depending on the line.
Yeah.
Right, how often do you change your line?
Depending on the abuse it's taken, you know. If I generally feel it, you know, you can start feeling it when it's chafed up, but
it's got little nicks out of it. It feels rough and you know, it's just, I don't know.
You can tell
it loses colour. You know, it's got like a sort of opaque, like a almost milky sort of look to it, where the edges have been scuffed, the outside's been scuffed.
If you're catching fish regularly, that will really, it messes your line up. You get the clutch issues with being the twist putting into it, the in and out, like through whatever obstacles you're fishing over. So it depends on the fishing that I'm doing. If I'm fishing somewhere really hard and I'm not catching very often, then the chances are the line's still going to be in pretty good nick, you know, because I've not had any war on it.
Right.
You know, but if you're catching regularly, like say a Thorpe Lee when I'm doing the tutorials, fishing over gravel bars, getting screaming take after screaming take, dragging them over the gravel, it just doesn't. It's not going to last forever. It's not wire. It's fishing line. You know.
Yeah. Cool. And then lastly, mate, just tell us what rods and reels you're using and you know why you're using them, basically.
I've got your DF Infinities there. Got your name on the side there. The reason being I've got the 3 3/4 is because I can reduce the pressure to the hook using light hooks. You know, so I'd rather be overgunned than undergunned.
When you say reduce the pressure, you mean don't play them as hard?
Yeah.
Right.
People say to me, "Oh, you've got stiff rods, but it must be horrible to play fish on." but they're only as stiff as you pull.
Right, as hard as you pull.
As hard as you pull, you know.
Right, right.
And I've caught plenty of fish on size 12 hooks on them, you know, gigantic on the zig rigs, you know, £7 bottom and a size 10 hook. No issues at all.
And a 30 pounder at 100 yards going crazy on a zig.
Yeah. They're only as stiff as you pull. It's like, if they lunge, you go with it, you know. And 3 3/4 is a number that scares a lot of people. To be honest, I've held rods of lower breaking chains that have felt stiffer and more harsh.
Yeah.
People rate their rods differently to other people's.
Different companies, you mean?
Yeah, different companies. If I put that 3 3/4 in your hand and told it as a 3 1/4 rod, you probably wouldn't bat an eyelid. You know, it's just a scary number to people because it's like test curves move on. Every 5 years, it becomes acceptable to use ½ a pound stiffer. When I started, a 2 1/4 was the norm.
If you had a 2 3/4, you were the man.
You were
long range fishing.
You were long range.
Now I haven't even got 2 3/4 rods in any range, like, you know.
I just think it's better to have the power there in reserve. You know, if they get in the weed, if you're trying to stop them, if you're casting big leads, casting sticks, you know, it's a fallacy that really stiffer rods will cast further. You know, because if you put a 3½ ounce lead on a spod rod and think you're going to outcast a 3½ ounce lead on a 3 3/4 rod, you're not going to. You know, so there is a limit.
You're not compressing the rod.
Yeah, there's a limit to how stiff a rod can be. But yeah, the number shouldn't scare people. You know, that's the thing. So many people say to me 3 3/4. They do. They're like, well, I said, if I didn't tell you that, if I told you that was a 3 pounder and I let you have a cast, you'd say that's the nuts. That is. It's just the fact that it's got that 0.75 on the end.
And the reels?
The Bazia QDX, without doubt, the best reels I've ever used. There's no doubt about that. The lightness, the clutch, everything about them, I love them. You know, I've heard people say that they're not hard wearing, but no one fishes as much as me, right? They do, right? But not many people.
I'm not far behind you, mate.
I fish regularly. I've had them since they came out, sort of 2008, I think, sort of 2007 time. I haven't sent them back for a service yet, and nothing's gone wrong on them, you know. I have damaged one myself, you know, but that was user error, you know. But for all these people that saying grit gets inside them and this happens and this happens, it's rubbish. It's absolute rubbish. You know, it's I think a lot of it comes from people that, because they look at it as high-end gear, they just mock it because they haven't got it. They say negative stuff about it because they haven't got it, you know. But it's really, really light, great clutch, immense line lay. Can't knock it.
Cool, wicked. Well, that is the hardware that Mr. Peck uses. That's how slack he fishes his lines. If you find yourself in the same position, look no further than what he's doing.